The night of October 10th unfolds beneath a sky heavy with secrets. What once seemed certain has begun to fracture, leaving every bond tested and every promise trembling. Behind elegant smiles and carefully constructed facades, hearts are unraveling. Dani's reckless choices echo like distant thunder, threatening to crush the fragile foundation she has built with Andre. Bill drifts between guilt and desire, his marriage to Haley tightening like a noose around his own silence. Eva stands at the edge of trust, reaching for help from those who never truly forgave. And somewhere in the quiet, Naomi and Jacob face a future neither of them feels ready to hold. Nothing about this night is soft. It is a storm of buried emotions, whispered betrayals, and impossible decisions, the kind of night that shatters everything people thought they knew about themselves. The house was silent, but Dani could still hear the echoes of that night, the night that should never have happened. No matter how much she tried to bury it beneath layers of excuses, self-justification, or numbness, it clung to her like smoke on fabric, seeping into every corner of her mind. That night with Bill wasn't a simple mistake, it was an earthquake. A crack that started small, quiet, almost invisible, and now threatened to split everything apart. She had convinced herself that marrying Andre so quickly would give her stability, that she could erase the part of her heart that still pulsed for someone else. It had felt impulsive, spontaneous, even thrilling. A way of proving to herself that she had moved on. But she hadn't. And now, in the cold aftermath, she understood how foolish that belief had been. Andre was kind, decent, safe. But love built on the desire to escape something else was never solid. It was hollow. Fragile. A thin wall of glass pretending to be concrete. Bill lived in the shadows of her mind. Even when he wasn't near, his presence was an ache that refused to fade. The memory of his hands, the warmth of his breath, the way the world disappeared when he looked at her, these things didn't belong to the past. They were alive, thrumming beneath her skin, whispering in the quiet moments when she wished for silence. Dani knew she couldn't blame alcohol or recklessness for what happened. Deep down, she had wanted it. And that was the part that sickened her the most. When Bill discovered she had married Andre, something in him cracked too. Not loudly, not like glass shattering. It was quieter, like wood splitting under pressure, the kind of sound that lingers because it promises something worse to come. His pride burned. His sense of control, of ownership, had been wounded. He had always believed Dani would orbit around him, no matter what happened. But she hadn't. She had chosen someone else. And that choice haunted him, filled him with a rage he tried to disguise as indifference. Andre was not blind. He saw the way Dani flinched when Bill's name was mentioned. He felt the cold spaces between their bodies at night, spaces no warmth could fill. He lived with the knowledge that her heart was somewhere else, yet pretended he didn't. Pretended because admitting it would mean accepting that the marriage he had thrown himself into was already decaying. Every silence between them was heavy. Every touch felt like an imitation of something real. He held on anyway, hoping that one day she might look at him the way she once looked at Bill. But hope, in moments like these, was nothing more than a slow kind of cruelty. Haley had once believed she was the lucky one. Bill had chosen her. Bill had built a life with her. But lately, that belief felt like a cruel joke. She had begged for his time, his attention, his heart. And every time he turned away, she felt a part of herself unravel. She watched him drift toward Dani like a tide that could not be stopped. She wasn't stupid. She could sense it in the way his voice softened when her name came up, in the way his eyes hardened when she demanded the truth. She felt herself becoming a woman she despised, desperate, jealous, brittle. A woman clawing at the edges of a love that had already left. The mirror no longer reflected someone she recognized. It showed a face etched with sleepless nights and quiet humiliations. She wanted to scream, to tear everything apart, to force him to look at her, not as an obligation, not as a chain, but as someone he once loved. But Bill's gaze always seemed to be somewhere else, far away, trapped in a past he refused to let go. Bill lived in a storm of his own making. Danny burned in his veins like a fever, a reminder of everything wild and dangerous in him. Haley was the structure, the safety, the woman who expected him to be the man he pretended to be. He couldn't tell her that the walls of their marriage felt like a cage now. He couldn't tell Danny that her impulsive marriage to Andre had ignited something ugly inside him. He couldn't tell himself the truth, that he was a coward. A man who wanted everything but could promise nothing. A man torn between guilt and desire. Haley's patience had limits, and she was reaching the edge. When she demanded answers, her voice was no longer that of a wounded wife. It was sharp, cornering him, leaving no room to run. Bill recoiled, not because she was wrong, but because she was right. Because every accusation she hurled at him was a truth he couldn't bear to face. He saw in her eyes the mirror of the man he had become, and it disgusted him. Meanwhile, Eva stood at a different kind of crossroads. Pride had always been her armor. But desperation has a way of stripping even the strongest down to their bones. She needed help, and the only people she could turn to were Mona and Jan, two women who had every reason to turn their backs on her. They despised her mother. They didn't trust her. They had seen too much, been burned too many times. As she stood before them, she felt the weight of every old wound pressing against her chest. It wasn't just the possibility of being refused that terrified her. It was the humiliation of having to ask at all. Lowering herself before people who would remember this moment forever, who might even savor it. She could already feel the sting of their cold eyes, the quiet judgment hiding behind polite faces. But she had no choice. When survival is at stake, pride is the first casualty. Mona and Jan exchanged glances, both torn between old grudges and the undeniable reality of Eva's distress. They could see the desperation etched into every movement she made. They could feel it. And that made it harder. Helping her would mean opening doors they had bolted shut years ago. Turning away would mean living with the knowledge that they had left someone to fall. In a small apartment across town, Naomi sat with her hands resting on her stomach as if it were someone else's body. Jacob's excitement had been immediate, overwhelming, almost innocent. He talked about the baby like it was a new beginning. But for Naomi, it felt like a lock clicking shut on a door she hadn't even decided to walk through. She wasn't ready. Not for motherhood. Not for the weight of something so permanent. Her dreams were still fluid, her life still undefined. The thought of being tied down to a future she hadn't chosen filled her with a quiet, suffocating dread. She loved Jacob, but love wasn't enough to erase fear. Jacob's joy became a cruel contrast to the storm inside her. Every smile he gave her was a reminder of the words she hadn't spoken yet. Every touch felt heavier, more final. She knew she couldn't keep this buried. Silence could only stretch so far before it broke. But speaking the truth would destroy something she wasn't sure she could rebuild. She imagined the look in his eyes, the hurt, the confusion, the disbelief. Not because she didn't love him, but because she didn't want the same future he did. And that kind of fracture wasn't something you could fix with apologies. It would live between them, a crack no one could unsee. Each of them, Danny, Bill, Haley, Eva, Naomi, Jacob, moved through their lives like people walking through a house built on fault lines. On the surface, everything appeared intact. The neighborhood was quiet. The houses were beautiful. But beneath the floors, the ground was shifting. Quietly. Patiently. Waiting for the right moment to collapse. Danny was consumed by guilt and longing, shackled between what she wanted and what she should be. Bill was devoured by obsession and cowardice, unable to sever ties or face consequences. Haley stood on the brink of self-destruction, her pain curdling into something volatile. Eva swallowed her pride, forced to rely on those who could easily crush her. Naomi was cornered by a future she didn't choose. Jacob was unknowingly standing on the edge of heartbreak. No one was innocent. No one was entirely to blame. They were all caught in a web they had spun together, a web of silence, secrets, and half-truths. Every choice they made pulled the strings tighter, tightening the noose around their own throats. It was only a matter of time before something snapped. The storm would not announce itself with thunder. It would come in quiet moments, in a look held too long, in a word left unsaid, in a door slammed shut. It would start with one crack, one betrayal brought to light, and then it would spread like fire through dry timber. When it came, there would be no clean escapes, no one walking away untouched. Bill would have to decide whether to keep living in the cage he built with Haley or burn it down for Danny. Danny would have to face the woman in the mirror, the one who betrayed not just others but herself. Haley might explode in a way no one could predict. Eva could be broken further or forge something new from the wreckage. Naomi's choice would redraw the lines of her entire future. Jacob's heart might shatter on a single sentence. When everything breaks, it won't be because of one night, one secret, one lie. It will be because of all the things they refused to face. All the truths they buried alive. And when those truths crawl back to the surface, they will tear through everything in their path, leaving behind only fragments of what once was, love, loyalty, trust, all reduced to shards on the floor. The storm is already gathering. It lives in every heartbeat, in every silent stare, in every choice postponed. None of them can stop it. All they can do is wait. The night didn't end with answers. It ended with fractures so fine and silent they were almost invisible, yet sharp enough to cut deep. Danny stood alone in the echo of her own choices, realizing that running from what she felt had only trapped her further. Bill's heart was a battlefield, torn between the life he built and the one he never truly let go of. Haley's rage simmered beneath the surface, no longer the kind that could be soothed with apologies. The quiet after her last demand was louder than any scream. Eva's desperate gamble left her isolated, unsure if reaching out had saved her or sealed her fate. Mona and Jan's hesitation hung like smoke, thick and bitter, proof that trust once broken rarely returns whole. Meanwhile, Naomi and Jacob stared at a future neither of them had the courage to name. Their silence wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, like the calm before a storm they both knew was coming. Every glance, every heartbeat, every breath carried the weight of what was left unsaid. Nothing had been resolved. Instead, the night carved new lines between them, lines that would soon turn into walls. There was no victory, no catharsis, only the unsettling realization that the choices made tonight would echo long after the lights went out. And in that darkness, they all understood a brutal truth: the real damage isn't done by a single moment of betrayal. It's done slowly, quietly, in the spaces where trust used to live.